They are both from the PACE Community Action Agency, and Portia is their site manager and Shelley is their family specialist. Ladies, would you mind sharing with us what exactly the PACE Community Action Agency is?
PACE Community Action Agency is, as it says, a community action agency, but it serves the community in several different ways. The biggest program we have is Head Start, and it provides educational services for 3 to 5-year-olds in the classrooms or in the homes, getting them ready to enter kindergarten. We also have an early Head Start program from 0 to 3, which that prepares the children to go into our preschool part. We also have other programs such as WIC, Healthy Families, weatherization, energy assistance, and we also have a program that is for profit that is Ventures Cleaning.
And Ms. Mason-Loffer, could you explain to us what a family care specialist does?
Sure. As a family specialist, our responsibility, I'm one of 7 at PACE. We serve 457 kids in Head Start and Early Head Start, so we're responsible for recruiting to fill those slots. We also enroll those children into the program. We provide case management to the families once they enter our program, and we're responsible for all the parent involvement and activities that we do with the family.
Okay. Did you identify with any of the challenges on the video? What do you think your biggest challenge in the PACE Community Action Agency would be, and how are you addressing that challenge?
I see one of the challenges that I see on an ongoing basis, is that early childhood educators are not seen as professionals. It's hard to believe when you think about with young children that you are molding those little children's lives for the future. And another challenge I see is the low pay that our teaching staff receives. We do a study every year to compare our wages to others, and actually we do pay our teachers fairly well, but when you go in to try to compare those to a school system, we cannot compare. So that's the 2 main challenges I see.
And what steps are being made to address those challenges?
Well, we try to educate the public of how important early childhood is, what you are doing for those children, and not just the children, but the families as well. The importance of getting those children ready for the real world of the public school. For as the wages, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. We're federally funded, so it's pretty well tied to funding. And it's a rarity if we ever see an increase. And if we do see an increase in funding, it doesn't catch up with everything else that has raised throughout the years.
And as far as the students that are coming into the Head Start program, did you identify the challenges that they face with those in the video? What do you think are their biggest challenges?
We face a lot of challenges from the environment the children come from. We're facing more behavioral issues that's coming into our sites. The one plus that we have is we get to know the families. So we get to know the environments from where those students are coming from. Something else that we face is how to work with these children with challenging behaviors. Our teachers are not trained for these. They can do some, but they're not professionals in that area. So we have to reach out into the community trying to find the professionals who can deal with behavior problems, and that's also something hard to find.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Mr. Tim Grove, who is the superintendent of the South Knox Public School Corporation. Did you, Mr. Grove, identify with any of the challenges in the video? What do you think that those challenges are for your school corporation?
I did. There certainly, I think, the issues, and it doesn't always come down to the money, but I do think that dictates a lot of what you're able to do and to address. The school classroom sizes. Those of you who have been students, which means all of you, can relate to the fact that your most successes came in classes that were probably a little bit smaller, and that may even carry over to your collegiate experience. So we do what we can to train and enhance what's being delivered within the classroom but you can only spread cut the pie so many different ways and have the money split up just a little bit. I think, though, one of the things that I didn't see directly in the video that I think maybe have been an underlying problem or thing that we face, and that's the attendance. I think you have to be there to learn. And on the same side of that, the teachers have to be there to teach. Portia mentioned the professionalism, not seeing sometimes the early childhood instructors as being professionals, and I think that's where educators need to be thought of as professionals. You have to get a college degree to be able to teach and do some of those things. But then I think we have an obligation as educators to act professionally ourselves. So be there and teach. You can't expect the students to learn if you're not teaching them.
Are you taking measures with attendance, I guess, on both parties?
We do, from both the student standpoint, expectations are that they're there, and we have rules within our student handbooks. As far as the teachers go, certainly contractually they're allowed to have so many absences, and we meet those, and we do recognize that fact. But we also do some things with our contract and reward those teachers who don't utilize all the days that they have. It's possible for some teachers to be able to theoretically take their entire last year off because they have so many days built up, but those are the ones who won't take a day off, and they'll be there all the way through to the very end.
Would you also mind explaining a little bit about your school corporation, the demographics for those who aren't familiar with South Knox Public Schools?
Certainly. We are a county school, rural makeup. We have an enrollment K through 12 of about 1,250, just a little under that number. A significant number of our families are two-parent households, which I do think that does contribute a lot to some of the successes we have academically. We have traditionally, our elementary schools have scored well on our elementary school. We have a K-6 building and a 7-12 middle high school. Traditionally score well. It's a farming community for the most part, although several of our patrons or community members work either here at Vincennes University or Good Samaritan Hospital, which speaks, I think, a lot to the county makeup as it is.
Okay, thank you very much. Next we have Ms. Carly Nichols, and she is a retired teacher from the Vincennes Catholic Schools. Ms. Nichols, would you mind sharing with us something that people might be surprised to know about a private school education?
I'd love to. The Catholic private school education is open to everyone, and it is more available than it's ever been before because of the voucher system. We do have a more diverse clientele now, and we've met with great success. I think one surprising thing about our system is that 32% of our enrollment is non-parishioner. So I think that kind of means that the community is ready for a school with a Christian environment where faith can be lived out and prayer can be a mainstay of the day.
So I'm thinking of, I was leading on to my next question. The challenges, what challenges did you identify with any of those mentioned on the video?
Yes, we do. Our clientele has changed in the last 20 years, and we do have more children coming from hard places. And so, we try to address that. And so many times we do have children coming in our system that we have to address a lot of different things before the learning actually can take place. But we do have a family system there, and we try to work with the family and bring them into our community where that they will be welcomed and feel a part of things in our fundraising and other things that's happening at our school.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nichols. Last but not least, we have Mr. Yulin Lalonde, and he is serving sort of double duty for us. He'll be talking about his work as a behavioral specialist in the Indianapolis Public School Corporation, and then his work as a 21st century scholar support coordinator?
Support specialist.
Specialist, thank you. Would you mind talking about the school with which you worked in Indianapolis and exactly what a behavioral care specialist does?
Yeah, so I have had the opportunity and privilege to work in several middle schools, rehabilitation centers, and inner city programs in Indianapolis. I started at Fall Creek Academy, which was a charter school, and graduated over to eventually James Whitcomb Riley, which is an IPS school. And I served as a counselor, direct care staff at the rehabilitation school, and I served as a behavior facilitator at James Whitcomb Riley. And when I entered into that job, I mean, I've had all the background to work with kids throughout the city, but when I left, I was drained, and that's because, like what you saw in the movie up here, all that is real. So for our future educators, teachers, administrators, the education starts in the state of the home, and then around the community. And if that is broken at all, then the classroom will be broken, like the young lady in the movie stated. So daily, I face the challenges of just kids kind of running throughout the hallways and behavioral outbursts, fights, things like that, which stem from the prior years of that school. The state of it, the principals had left. I think they had 14 principals in the past 7 years, and then over 20 teachers within that building. So the kids didn't have any trust with any person that stepped in that school, first off and foremost. Some of the parents or some of the teachers who did stick around throughout the years, all the kids would come running to them, and that was like the mom and truly the dad to their life. So eventually, we got a new principal. His name's Mr. Posey, and he has a 3-year contract. Now, if he stays there, that'll be up to him and God. But the lack of support, resources, and funding to keep community members in the school and outside sources to come in was not as strong as it is now. So now that they have brought in more community members, literally neighbors that live in that community have come in to give guidance and structure to these kids. That's helped. We've had some other supports come in from some of the local hospitals as far as some of the mental, cognitive, learning disabilities, things of that nature. I was the only behavior facilitator at that school in my short term there. That was an interesting ride, but we did bring in 4 or 5 more after I left. So just having somebody there that the students could see themselves relating to, and that happens to be African American men. However, whoever comes into that school and can show relatability to those students, and just by kind of learning their culture or just being human, you're already relating to them by being human. So you don't have to go too far above and beyond, but just kind of understanding what it's like for mom and dad not being there, what it is like in their home, where they don't have, food to eat, or, outside of their neighborhood, you have crime. Things of that nature play a huge role on how these kids think. The media that these kids listen to, the culture that they're grasping onto and trying to implement that into the classroom does not create a productive learning environment. So my position there was just to come in and really just give back to the kids, meet them at their level, teach them social skills, teach them that yes, you can trust me, and just kind of minister to their lives. So as the speaker down here said, some of the teachers aren't necessarily trained in that arena as far as how to deal with those underlying roots I mean, their job is there to teach, but the reality is when you guys go into these classrooms, if they are inner city or if they are rural, and the students are coming in from difficult homes, then you have to be more than a teacher. You have to be a counselor. You have to be a lifeguard. You have to be a coach. You have to be an ordained minister sometimes. It's just, you have to be all these things. As far as the 21st century support, many of the students here may or may not have already spoke to me, but I support the students here with the scholarships for 21st, making sure that they fit all their criteria to remain in that scholarship and transferring to four-year university as well. So.
You mentioned that you had that you had worked in a charter school as well. Was there a large difference between the two schools?
So, Fall Creek Academy was a little more put together and structured because they had staff there that was continually there as far as attendance. The problems that we faced with that school were very minute compared to James Whitcomb Riley. We had people there continuously. I mean, the amount of trauma that the students received at Riley, which is a school that's in the Butler-Tarkenton area, which is next to Butler University, that community, that neighborhood is right down the street from Fall Creek Academy. Fall Creek Academy is no longer a charter school. They closed it up, and I think they turned it over to the state, but I don't think they're operating anymore. But that's what happens to when schools close. They eventually turn over to the state, and then the state turns them into whatever subjugation they have in mind. But as far as the issues with the charter school, the state, to my knowledge, can change things around that they see fit. So some of the students that were allowed into the school were already on good graces and on a good route to success. So we had smaller issues with them because they could weed out students that they were deemed at risk.
Thank you. As far as the 21st Century Scholarship Program and the students with which you work, what do you think their biggest challenges? What are the biggest challenges for college students?
For the first year students, I try and stay in contact with as many students as possible via emails, just talking to students in person. And generally the first few weeks are really good from the feedback I've been getting. But for the first year students, the students who are the first to ever come to college in their entire family, their challenges are learning the ropes of college. If they've not seen anybody go to college and don't really see the big picture of why am I doing this for 4 years of my life, what is this piece of paper going to do for me, it's the lack of knowing or the lack of support from their own family and or state of their home and where they came from. So it all kind of goes back to the home and not knowing what they want to do. And the Career and Employer Relations Center, where my department is, we help cultivate that track for getting students ready for that leap into their career via internships, resume building, things like that. So the importance of that, when I was a student here a while ago, I just didn't know, and I think a lot of students can relate to me when I come to talk to them. When I ask them, what are you studying? They say general studies. What is that going to lead into? Well, I don't know. So I know what that's like, just not knowing and not having to really taking that time to look further into the future, just because you're having to deal with life, bills, family, whatever. So for the scholars out there and non-scholars, first year, second year, things of that nature, it all kind of comes back to the same thing. Knowing who you are, having a support system, and if you don't have those two things, it can be really, really difficult, maintaining any type of GPA worth standing.
Thank you so much. We'll sort of go back to the video a minute whenever we saw that screen with the map and the teacher implanting knowledge, and the idea of tracking came up as far as students being on a vocational or a college prep track. And this is for any panelist to jump in there. Do you think that that's a help or a hindrance to students?
I'll hit it.
Yeah.
There is some merit to some small degree in being able to have a student find what their niche is. But as Udlin just said, you can be in your 30s and not know exactly what you want to do. And the danger with tracking is that you take a student who may struggle at one point in their early career, and they will get stuck in that particular track. I think there has to be some freedom for movement. I would have been considered somewhat of a non-traditional student myself. I graduated from high school and didn't attend college for 3 years because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was going to be responsible for paying for my college education myself, so I didn't see the sense in spending money finding myself. So I worked. And then after I decided to go into education, I did that in 4 years, and then decided I didn't want to teach. And so I spent a few years, just about 4.5, working whatever it took to pay my bills, and then decided, well, if I wait too much longer, I'll have to go back if I ever decide to teach. I got my license, began teaching at the prison at Carlisle, working as an employee for Vincennes University, and then went into public education after 3 years. I say all that in my background, not that I want you all to know that so much as to say that tracking students and putting them in a particular area and leaving them there is not the answer. However, what we need to do is to keep a lot of options open, allow students to explore some things in high school, and maybe a little bit before that, and see what it is that they want to do. Eliminating vocational programming, it would be a terrible tragedy, especially in some of our areas, but even in urban areas. I think they need to be exposed to different things that they might have an interest in or find an interest in. So danced around the question a little bit, but I don't think tracking itself is the entire answer.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can we lay that question to rest then? Okay. I would like to talk about, of course, the Matt Damon clip where he says none of his positive qualities can be tested. Standardized testing, sort of a large hype word. Anyone says for all panelists again, your overall opinion of standardized testing and its ramifications.
Well, it'd be surprising, although I'm in early childhood, several years ago, they actually put in a standardized test for 3 to 5-year-olds. I could not believe it. And it was conducted just like the public schools standardized test. You read what they told you to read. You took the answer they gave you or what they pointed to you. And although we knew it was not developmentally appropriate for 3 to 5-year-olds, they still did this for about 2 years. And they spent millions of dollars doing this. And after 2 to 3 years, they did away with it. So I personally do not see the advantage of standardized testing.
And this was state legislation?
No, this was federal.
Federal legislation. Okay, thank you.
I liked taking standardized tests because that was another day I wasn't taking notes in class. But the reality is I could be an excellent test taker, but that doesn't necessarily, the results don't really show what I might know. The flip side of that is you can have some very intelligent, knowledgeable students who don't do well in standardized testing. And to put as much emphasis on these tests, and I know you have to somehow or another gauge how people do and track how they are doing, I just think that you missed the point. There needs to be more than just the test to be able to see how the students are doing.
Where would we look if we weren't looking at testing Where do you think a good place would be?
The classroom, I think, and that's again goes back to what I'd said before about being there. The teacher should be able to gauge the level of mastery that the student would be having.
That sort of connects with some articles we've been reading in my class about the achievement gap, but also about the No Child Left Behind law. Does anyone want to clarify that for our audience, what that law was and sort of the repercussions of that law? Anyone want to go here? Jump on board.
I always classified it as the No Child Gets Ahead law. But what it really did was it was well-intentioned, and it was designed to make certain that no child, regardless of their intellectual abilities, would be left behind and not be able to learn. The problem is, as with many things that are broad in scope, is that it left too many kids behind. It didn't address and didn't provide an avenue to address the needs of a varied and in one classroom you could have a variety of different abilities, and so everything becomes really broad and not much depth to that. And to expect the schools to meet the requirements of the No Child Left Behind legislation, you had to have certain advancement in over the years in your score, and it wasn't just hard for the poor performing schools. The reality is it's very difficult for the high performing schools, because after you get to a certain level, improvement is difficult, but the improvement was still expected. And so it was set up for failure. And so I'm not disappointed to see it go. I do think we still need to hold schools accountable. But I think and I hope that as they move forward with the replacement legislation, ESSA, that they listen to educators, and not just public school educators. I'm a product 12 years of parochial school, so I do know the benefits of that as well. But listen to educators. I'm on a soapbox, I guess, but everybody's an expert on schools because we've all attended schools. But that doesn't mean that they all have the answers or the right answers. If you use that philosophy, that because we've all been in schools we know, then I should be able to tell Good Samaritan Hospital how to do things because I was born in a hospital, and so I know.
Anyone else? What about the new Every Student Succeeds Act that the Obama administration has put in? Is there a difference? Is it better? Is it worse?
I can say that the legislation level, when those choices are made, and when it comes down to hitting the floor and running, there are schools that receive that impact, and funds are distributed into those particular schools, and then there are schools that just are on an island. So with those schools, these changes are being made. There are people in offices making decisions for places they've never been, never seen, and quite frankly aren't going to come to. So what happens to the schools left on this island? And as Tim said, these expectations of improvement they're not happening. So when these kids are pushed through the system, you have, one kid in a class or two kids in a class who do not know how to read, and cannot do, more simple mathematical equations. So when you put those two students in this class, well, then that classroom is turned upside down. So pulling those two kids out, putting them in a specific classroom to catch up. If the funds aren't there for the personnel to come in to re-educate and go back 2 or 3 grade levels, get the social worker involved to see what's going on at home. things like that, you're dealing with a toxic situation here. So I vividly recall sitting in summer session and getting some of the kids to redo the I-read, and that's a state test where you have to pass this I-read in order to essentially move on. If the kids don't pass the test, I think the mom and dad or guardian can make an appeal or something, and then they can get the kid in the right grade. Because after a certain level, our educators up here, the professionals who have been in the classrooms teaching, know that after a certain level, it's redundant and it's not getting anywhere for the kid, so you have to push the kid through. And when you do that, it causes the upside down turn. The funds aren't over here to support these kids, and I'm sitting with this brilliant little boy in summer session, and I'm trying to get him to understand just words, really, really simple words, and he just wasn't grabbing it. And there was a lot of times I was exhausted, I was fatigued, nothing was really getting through. So when I get exhausted, I have no one else to look around for, to tap in and say, okay, here's Nathan, we got this far. And that happens all the time. Now, I didn't stop with Nathan. I addressed the parents and said, hey, what other sources can we get for him? Is his cognitive ability, learning-wise, is it at a lower level? It was. But when we did the appropriate paperwork to get him into the right class or right school, that criteria to get this particular student into that school kept coming back and it was rejected because of the criteria wasn't met. He was deemed capable when he clearly was not. So when things like that happen, it's like, all right, I sincerely pray that wherever his future is, someone somewhere, after all the things that I did for him, to advocate for him, to get him into the right classroom, to get him into the right school, someone would finally take his case serious. So there's millions of kids out there being pushed through these loopholes and are in these voids. So the No Left Child Behind Act and the legislation, the new legislation, some of that stuff doesn't even touch the schools. So, it's a scary story, but so I with my full heart behind me, I hope that everybody who is going to become a teacher here knows what they're getting into as far as when they choose a school to go to, whether it be rural or public or private, because in all three of those branches, you'll find a situation, a case, to where it's going to need your administration, the family, the social workers, such forth, for just one student.
Thank you very much. We'll end on one question, then we'll open it up to 2 questions. If you are getting extra credit, the sign-up sheets, or you are here because you need to be, the sign-up sheets will be on the stage at the end. You can come up and sign those. So last question for any of the panelists or all of you. What would the perfect education system or school look like? Or at least one component. Would one great component of a school be, or one current thing in your school that you think is great?
I'll jump into that one. There was a school that had top math scores, the top math scores in the state, and whatever academy it was, an IPS school. And I was talking to one of the teachers, and I said, "How in the world do you guys have the top scores in math? What's going on over there? That's not happening at this school." And they were weeding kids out, and that community economically economically speaking, they had more money. The community was clean and more well organized and put together. So just being in that environment. So if it deals with economics, and it deals with the personnel in that school, if they're going to be there every single day, and if the school is going to be let's cater to a specific school here. Are we going to be relatable to the students as far as the diversity, and can we get people in there that look like the students? Because there's a lot of trust issues with African American minority schools. Same hand for a rural school. If you have, it doesn't matter if you're what color, came from what, it doesn't matter. It just relate to these students and be consistent and make sure that the funds are there to where if they need support with a child who's going through certain learning curves or at-home issues, make sure that those support blocks are in place, and you're not spinning the wheel trying to troubleshoot all the time and get new people in and out of the building.
The one thing I would say, and it's easy to say this, but to have it, a community that values education, and I think from the parents, and they share that with their students or their children, and then the school values it, and the actions that they take reflect that. I think you can overcome sometimes some of those shortcomings from a financial standpoint because you find ways to overcome them. But you have people who then relate, and but that's where it has to start. The perfect school is one that is in a place where the education is valued, and the people within the school are valued. And if you start there, then I think there's no perfect model. They might all look different depending on the community, but that's where it starts.
Something that I would like to see, it probably will never happen, to go back several years ago, maybe 15 years ago, where a child can be a child. Anymore, there are so many more demands on the 3 to 5-year-olds, even the 0 to 3-year-olds, to be ready for school, be ready for school. Children are children. And they are making these demands that these children, what they want them to do, is not developmentally appropriate. But we're forced to do it because our outcomes, we have to have good outcomes also. So we have to start teaching actually what they want done in kindergarten anymore. And I think it's the same thing in public schools. Kindergarten now is first grade, and so forth. But kids cannot be kids anymore. And I really think that affects them throughout their school years.
I would like to add too, I think that even happened earlier, because I remember in 1987 I was teaching, and I was teaching first grade at the time, and I think it was a pilot thing through the state, but first graders were given the I-STEP test, and it was a thick book. And we spent 3 days. I had an aide with me. I had probably 20 children in my classroom, and we did the I-STEP test, and they all had their little rulers, and we had it under each item, and it was a nightmare. But we start pushing very early, and I have a concern with that.
Thank you so much. We're going to move to some audience questions. I'm going to ask my colleague, Professor Stevenson, to sort of go among the audience and get any questions you might have. If you have questions, just raise your hand.
All right. This is for Mr. Tim Grove. And has standardized testing had a positive impact on your school corporation?
It has. It certainly, we, and this is my 5th year there, traditionally, our elementary especially scores very well. And I think whenever we have that success, then it breeds more success and pride in the school.
Thank you.
There's one back there.
Mr. Groves, you said that your school is successful in elementary. I do believe I looked on county school rankings. South Knox Elementary had 4 stars, along with Franklin here in Vincennes Community School. You guys' overall rating is, I think, in the 89 percentile. What do you owe that credit to?
Again, I'll speak for us. It has to do, I think, a lot with the support from home, the valuing of education. And we make it important. The testing, it's important. Now, we don't teach to the test, but we certainly teach that the test is important. And I think that's where it comes from, is just knowing the significance of that, and it's just a matter of taking it seriously, and it's a school-wide feeling.
Okay. Because you did state earlier, I noticed that Pace and the Catholic retired teacher said that they noticed children with behavioral problems. Do you believe that your school is higher in ranking because you have, like you said, families, children that come from two-parent families?
I think that contributes. Now, make no mistake about it, we do have our share of students who do have a few issues, I would say. And it's not just entirely, I don't want to lay that on the single-parent homes. My late mom would tell you that I was kind of a problem child myself in school and discipline issue. But it does contribute. It's all that entire package where you have, and even those students who might be inclined to act up or act out, because the environment is such that it's squelched pretty quickly, and you don't deal with a lot of the behavior. It's the expectations of what we look for. And that's the same, I think, in any school, any successful school. The expectations are clearly delineated.
My question is from Ms. Hockman. You said earlier how your Head Start is teaching stuff from kindergarten level. Do you think, in your opinion, in the future that they'll just do away with kindergarten and just have Head Start then first grade?
Repeat that again, that last part.
Do you think, in your opinion, that they're just going to go do away with kindergarten and just do Head Start and then move up to first grade?
Oh, no, I don't think that'll ever happen. I really look for the future of the state, all schools having their own preschool for 4-year-olds. I think that's the way they'll do, and then they'll be there and go on into kindergarten. And I believe then Head Start in the future will probably have mostly the 3-year-olds.
You're getting your work out.
This one's for Mr. Tim Grove. Why do you think that South Knox's elementary school scores so much higher than North Knox's elementary school when they're both in the same area?
Part of it, I think, goes back to, and we're talking historically, for several years, since about 1998-99 school year, there's just been the one elementary school. And so the resources, both financial as well as educational resources, were focused in one place. At North Knox, it's been a much more recent change in the setup, the way the schools were done. At one time, until the 2011-12 school year, there were 3 different elementary schools, and it was hard to pool those resources. And so you didn't have the ability, I think, to coordinate. While the expectation standards are the same, that made a difference. I think what you will find, and again, I certainly appreciate the accolades that our school receives. I know that it's the hard work, but I also know that there are things outside of our control that contributed to that. I know that the teachers, the school corporation at North Knox, and the same with Vincennes community, as well as the Vincennes Catholic schools, I'd take any of those teachers in my school corporation as well, because I know they would work hard as well and do work hard. We're just fortunate in some of the things that we have. You know, if you want to, and it's not that our kids are better, you just switch things around and have that, just a few of those things, and I think you would see the same successes for those kids. We're just pretty fortunate.
Thank you.
I actually have 2 questions. My first question would be for Portia, just because I'm going into the Head Start preschool kind of thing, and I want to own my own daycare, but I know that's your thing, and I just want to know what should be like my main focus? Like, where should my head be once I'm going into starting up my own daycare, and like just overall of dealing with the children and how to adjust and getting the parents' trust. And I mean, I know a degree can say a lot, but then again, you still have to earn that trust with the kids and the parents, and doing it on your own is kind of different. So I want to know, like, what should my head be to, be able to just go in and handle business the way it's supposed to be done.
If you're going to want to open up your own preschool or daycare, number one, you have to have the passion. You're going to have a lot of hours. You better make a budget. It's very, very costly. People think you can go into this and make a living. It's going to be very, very hard. For as gaining the trust of a parent, I'm going to actually turn that over to Shelley, because she works with the parent, but that is very, very important. As you have seen, I'm sure, when you come into those classrooms, the teaching staff meet each one of those parents on a daily basis when they come into that classroom. And they will speak to that parent when they come in, because that parent is very, very important to us and to their child, because they are their child's first teacher. And we want them to feel comfortable, feel safe in our environment. If they feel safe, then their child's going to feel safe, and they'll be open to being educated, both sides, family and child. But let me have her talk about the families.
Well, you took what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
I just think it's important to let that parent know how important they are in their child's life, because you're not always going to be there. I mean, when you look at, and with our parents, when they're given their parent handbook at the beginning of the year, we have a little pie graph in there that shows them the amount of time that they're with us and the amount of time that they're in home with their child, and we can't compare to that. So it's just so important that they're doing those things that you're introducing to that child, that they're doing and carrying over at home with them, and just building that rapport with them, letting them know how important they are. I mean, kids don't come with handbooks, so they come in, and I think a lot of times they're intimidated by the educator, and that's something we work really hard at Head Start, is trying to prepare them for whenever they come to the schools, that you do have a voice in your child's education. And don't be afraid to go in there and say, hey, I don't understand this, and my child's not getting this. How can you help me?
Well, falling back on that, do you think, I guess people probably think it, but they never ask. But if you feel like something is best for the child or might work with the child because you do it, but they're not following it at home to make it a better outcome, do you believe that it's okay to tell a parent, not tell them exactly what to do for their child, but suggest certain things that they think will be best in that situation, or how their behavior issues are that will benefit them because we do it in the classroom? Do you think it's okay to, let that parent know, I think you should, try this or do something different, without the parent getting offended?
You used a word that I would change. I wouldn't tell them anything. I think if you have built that relationship, they are going to be very open to any suggestions that you make. I know within our Head Start program, we have parent-teacher conferences just like the schools do. And through the assessments and observations that we have done throughout the year, we share with the parents where every child is on an individual basis at their age level. And with that parent, then we set goals to work with at home. And then we'll see if that child is moving up. If we see they are not moving up, then we might, call the parent and say, hey, I don't see a lot of improvement. Maybe we can change things. But the number one is to get that relationship, and they will be open up to listen to you.
Last question, I promise.
Oh, I think I think I need to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
But I'm sure Ms. Hockman will probably be outside at the
You can come
reception.
to my office and ask me.
I think that it's time. I don't want to keep people over. So thank you so much for attending today. Let's have one round of applause again for our panelists. Thank you. There's a light reception, and the sign-up sheets will be right here. Thank you so much.